Hey writers, so today we're going to be taking the skills we've worked on in our persuasive essay writing and going back to writing to friends about books that we have read, friends or family members. So this is a new checklist, and you're going to notice that it still says start with a greeting, tell them about the book you're sharing, tell them about your recommendation, and then that's what we're going to focus on for today. So let's take a look at the letter that I'm working on writing. I'm writing a letter to Miss Ramoser, and I'm writing it to her about a book that's actually one of my favorite books. It's called About Grace, and it's by Anthony Doerr. Let's take a look at it real quick. So this is About Grace right here. It's one of my favorite books. I read it, the first time I read it, I was actually in high school, and I've read it a couple of times since then. You know, when you're an experienced reader, you have the time and you make the time to read chapter books that you really love. So you'll notice it's a chapter book. It's got a lot of text on every page. It's like about 400 pages long. It's this great, beautiful story with magical realism, and it also has these amazing details about snow crystals. So because the main character is a hydrologist, he actually studies the way water works, and he studies the way snowflakes form. So that's another story for another time, but today we're going to take a look at the letter that I'm writing to Miss Ramoser about this story. So I'm writing to her to let her know all about this book. In this case it's because I really love it, but I could also choose a book that I don't really love. So you've chosen a book to write about, and now you're going to go take a look at this checklist. You notice the first thing on here is to start with a greeting. We start with a greeting because we want to write somebody a letter and make them actually want to read it. So let's take a look at the greeting that I started with here. Hey, what have you been reading recently? Oh, and I should put a question mark there. That's my greeting. Okay, so there's my greeting. Now let's go back and look at what's next on the checklist. Step 2 for today is to tell them about the book you're sharing. Okay, so I know this is about Grace. I've got the title right here. I can write it. I know that I've got the author's name. So let's take a look at what I wrote. Here I wrote, I wanted to tell you about Grace by Anthony Doerr. And I end with a period. Great. So that's the second thing. I've done that. Now I can check it off. Make sure you're not checking this off on your own checklist because you haven't written your letter yet. Okay, so the next thing says, tell them about your recommendation. And now I'm looking at this example here. This is the third step. It says, I recommend that you read/don't read this book because. Well, I'm definitely recommending that she read it. So I'm going to circle that. And then I'm going to start the sentence the same way. I recommend that you read this book because. Okay, so I'm going to start with, I need to go back and look at the spelling of recommend here. I'm always using tools around me to figure out how to spell things. Recommend. Okay. Recommend this book because it has a beautiful storyline, interesting characters, and fascinating details about snow. And now I'm really trying to convince or persuade her to read this. So I'm going to write, you should read it. Now for today, you can write anything else that you would like to try to tell Miss Ramoser or whoever you're writing to about this book. So I could keep on writing. I could write a bunch of other stuff. And once you've done those things on the checklist, you're going to do the same. But let's just check off step 3 because I told her about my recommendation. So real quick check. I want you to look back at your checklist right now and take a look at each of the different things you're going to be doing. Put your finger on the first thing. Read it with me. It says start with a greeting. So make sure your letter has a greeting. Great. Now put your finger on the second one. It says tell them about the book you're sharing. Make sure you do that. And then finally put your finger on the third one. Read it with me. Tell them about your recommendation. And here's the example. I recommend that you read/don't read, and you choose one, this book because, okay. So today, you've got to make sure you've got these first 3 items on the checklist, and then you can do whatever you would like with your letter. Remember that if you finish one letter, you're welcome to turn it in to get some feedback, but you should not be raising your hand to tell me you're done. You should just simply start a new letter. Go ahead and get started with writing about your book.